First, I want to say thank you to Elaine and She Sings for finding this wonderful piece of music that, how many months have y'all been talking about? About 5 months. They've been talking about leading this, and we're going to enjoy hearing this. And I personally appreciate it because the phrase, all will be well, has been meaningful to me for a number of years. It's provided some grounded comfort at some rough moments, and I look forward to hearing it. I also want to thank Susan Chandler for her thoughts on the music in Affirmation of Julian of Norwich. But before she sings, I'd like to share a little bit of background about Julian of Norwich, because the more I started studying her, the more fascinated I became. So if I go a little long about this, I'm sorry. It's just one of my interests. Julian of Norwich was a British mystic who was born sometime around 1342. And that seems pretty long ago for her to be relevant in our day. And a lot of details of her early life are unknown, but they think that she came from a privileged family and was probably widowed in one of the epidemic plagues that were so common during her lifetime. And it's thought that she never considered the religious life until about age 30, when she survived an illness so severe that she and everyone else really thought that she was going to die. And during her illness, she had these intense visions of Jesus. And by the time she recovered, they came to an end. But during her illness, she faithfully wrote down what she had experienced in the visions. And that writing became the foundation for the source of her major work called The 16 Revelations of Divine Love. And apart from the incredible wisdom of this book, it's important to note that her book is thought to be the first book printed in the English language that was written by a woman. Julian became well known throughout England as a spiritual authority, and many people journeyed from near and far to learn from her and receive her wisdom. Her devotion led her to choose the life of an anchoress at the local church, which was named by after another Saint Julian. And this was a spiritual practice that, not being raised Catholic, I didn't really know about. And it's very unfamiliar to most of us, I think. Even though she wasn't a nun, someone could choose to be an anchoress. And that was someone who was called to a solitary spiritual life, but one who wasn't completely behind closed walls. To choose to be an anchoress or to become one, you had to go through a screening process to make sure that you could really commit yourself for the rest of your life to this spiritual process. So she was believed to have stamina for this life, and so a funeral service for her was held. And after that, she literally was closed into a monastic cell for the rest of her life, which was, 20 or 30 years. So symbolically, Julian was dead to her old life. And her monastic cell was a very simple room attached to the sanctuary of that church, where she spent her days in prayer, meditation, and writing. But she still had contact with the world. She had 3 windows, one where she could see into the sanctuary and participate in services, one to communicate with the servant who brought her food and took care of other life necessities, and a third window from which she could offer advice to those who came to her. Her commitment to this life offered her solitude to explore the deeper meaning of the visions that she had had. And these visions helped her make sense of the hardships in her day. So you can imagine the 1300s. It was not a warm and fuzzy time to be alive. The social conditions and the poverty were appalling. Plague stalked the countryside, high taxes, soaring prices. And when the people had had enough, there was the Peasants' Revolt in 1381. But from this emerged many fascinating theological thinkers in addition to Julian, who challenged the church. The church where Julian's cell was located was only a half mile from where the followers of John Wycliffe were burned for their heretical beliefs. And those beliefs helped lay the foundation for the Protestant Reformation. And Wycliffe, as a liberal religious thinker, helped lay the groundwork for Unitarian and Universalism. And what makes Julian of particular interest to us as UUs is that she was considered a proto-universalist. And her writings predated the rise of modern Unitarian thought in Transylvania by 200 years. And though she lived in a time of turmoil, her theology was very optimistic. Rather than talking about law and duty, she spoke of God's love, of joy and compassion. She broke with the common understanding of suffering as something that God inflicted and wrote that God loved and wanted to save everyone. So in this, she really leaned toward universal salvation. What's interesting is that even with her radical writings, the religious authorities of the day didn't challenge her. And no one knows from this point in history whether they didn't challenge her because of the authority and almost power awarded her as an anchorist. Or perhaps she was a woman and they didn't take her seriously. We don't know. But her influence continues today. Julian's theology was unique in three aspects that really relate to who we are. She believed that God is all love rather than wrathful. She believed that wrongdoing, sin, if you will, is actually necessary because it brings us self-knowledge. That certainly rings true with us when we think about all the mistakes we've made in our lives that were helpful. She taught that humans sin, they make mistakes because they are naive, not because they're evil. And lastly, she wrote that God is both Father and Mother. And this idea was also developed by St. Francis of Assisi, and we see it later in our own Unitarian transcendentalist theologian, Theodore Parker. And we also see it more recently in feminist theology. Julian often wrote of Christ as mother and wove into this concept of motherhood as the foundation of creation, being the motherhood of all of us that is experienced in the midst of nature. We give thanks for the wisdom of Julian of Norwich, who speaks to us in word and song.
You're holy,
In silence, let us hold the spirit of this song for just a few moments. In a spirit of trust and hope, we share the celebrations and concerns that are part of the life of this community, those that we hold in our hearts and those that are shared on Sunday mornings. One of our joys is always when people come to share this morning with us. If you're visiting with us and would like to stand and share your name and where you're from, I invite you to do that at this time. So in a spirit of sharing, I offer these joys and sorrows. Andy Nelson, Andy, raise your hand. Shares the joy that her daughter Bree passed her CPCE exam and will graduate with a master's in science in May. That's wonderful. Mary Beth Kurtz. Hey, you're in here and not teaching RE today. Wow, what a concept. Katie swam in 3 events in the state short course swim meet yesterday, and her relay team placed 6th in the state, which is very exciting. Yeah. Sarah Harcum has a joy that there's a concert today at Anderson University at 3 p.m. with Disney music. A little upbeat, wonderful thing. Carolyn Turner shares the sorrow at the loss of her sister this past Wednesday evening in Huntsville, Alabama. A memorial service is tentatively scheduled in Fort Myers, Florida in mid-March. We'll be thinking about you. Mary Scott West shared her concern that her best friend's father-in-law, Afton Weaver, is beginning radiation Monday through Fridays indefinitely for a rare cancer. Heidi Campbell, our thoughts go to her. Healing thoughts for her arthroscopic knee surgery this coming Tuesday. And this is from Janet Marsh, concern. Renee Mendola called Janet this morning. Renee's dad is at the end stage of liver disease. He will begin hospice care this week. Renee will be with him and her mother in Alabama this week, and she asks that we send them and her love and support during this difficult time. So in a spirit of trust and hope, let us hold these joys, concerns, and sorrows in our hearts. Also holding up what we feel is in our heart that needs to be addressed and healed today. O love that will not let us go, that sustains us through all that is our lives, we hold up today the joys and sorrows, the concerns that have been shared here. Our love for those who have passed out of this life and those loved ones who are in transition to leave this life. We give thanks for the children who surround us, reminding us of hope and promise. We are reminded also of the pain and the suffering, the hunger that lives still in this fragile world of ours. And so we renew our commitment this day to care for each other, to care for all living creatures, to care for our Mother Earth, knowing that every act of hope and justice and peace reverberates throughout the world, making a difference, though we may never know whose lives we are touching. In trust and hope, we offer our good wishes, our hopes, our dreams, that ultimately all will be well. Amen. And it is in a spirit of hope and trust that I invite us to rise as we are able to share hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. In this community, we weave together the whole of our lives, trusting that here we can try to make meaning of things that often don't feel like they have meaning. And in that space of sharing, the phrase, "all will be well," holds a beautiful and meaningful sentiment. Over the centuries, many people have found that phrase deeply comforting. And yet, I remember a conversation with someone in a previous congregation who was very angry when I shared that phrase, because he said that mantra, that affirmation, feels like a slap in the face. How can we say all will be well in the midst of great tragedy, of loss, in the face of the Holocaust, in our isolation? Our world too often seems like it's at the brink. We rail against what is wrong, and yet we are here as people who, in spite of our doubts and fears, are today beginning again in love and hope. We are beginning again to reconstitute our lives and reconstitute the world. Not out of some naive notion of how the world functions, but because in spite of what seems to be wrong with the world or wrong with our lives, we continue to seek goodness, to find hope and peace in the world. And Julian understood that. I love the arrangement that was that Meg's? Meg Barnhouse's arrangement. Your arrangement. I love sorry, I didn't mean to. Yeah, but that whole thing where it turns on that phrase of her acknowledgement of what is wrong to say, baby girl, baby boy, don't you know that love is the final thing? That's wonderful. Because Julian understood that she was human like we are. She wrote those words not from the comfort of her life, but after she experienced her own dark night of the soul when she thought she would die. It was during that terrible illness that she received her visions of a loving and all-embracing God, however we might want to name that. She came to the brink of life, to the cliff, to that suffering, and found a greater, a deeper source of understanding and comfort. She returned from that place with hope and promise, the promise that all would be well. So we are, like Julian, called to consider how in the midst of our lives, how in the midst of loss and grief, we will survive. As we experience the tumultuous nature of life, there are times when we simply have to release ourselves into the chaos. Sometimes we find if we struggle against what we can't control, our pain is exacerbated. And too often, I'm speaking from personal experience here, too often we try to avoid discomfort and pain, not realizing that the only way to get over it is to get beyond the pain, to go through it. So how do we take that experience and learn from it? This is important, for when we hold anger and fear and loss too close, we become trapped. There is in this verse the acknowledgement that when we get to the edge of our endurance, we simply have to surrender. But the reality is that surrender is a really difficult concept, particularly for people of privilege in North America, which we are. We want to be in control. Yet power, money, control cannot keep us from the full onslaught of life. I learned a great deal about surrender and finding that all will be well when I attended a seminar with Dr. Bernie Siegel, whose work focuses on patients with cancer. And I may have mentioned this before because it had a really profound effect on me, that person after person in that seminar spoke of their gratitude for their cancer. Somehow, in coming to grips with their fear over dying, they were given a deeper understanding of their lives. It was as if the people gathered there had surrendered, and in that surrender found that all will be well. They didn't give up, but this deeper knowledge came only after they released their need for power and control. They didn't say it was easy. They said that they learned that the ego had no place in their choosing to live life. Ultimately, they had to reach that place of trust in a greater reality. For me, that understanding comes from our connection to the whole of creation. Only when we emerge from that place of surrender to our connection to a greater reality can we then find the strength to lift our head again, take another step forward, and accept deep in our bones that all will be well. And like the mystics of many religious traditions, Julian found in her years of spiritual exploration a deep understanding of universalism, as I mentioned earlier. She knew that what happens in life is not because there's a God out there somewhere who punishes human beings, or that bad things happen because of something we did wrong or because we're sinners. Through her personal suffering, she came to know that bad things can happen at any time to any of us. But her connection to that sacred unity of all showed her a place in our beings that connects us all to a hope and trust that is stronger than our life challenges. When we are brought to the edge of our endurance, there is something there that calls us to sing, to see hope again, to seek out loving companions. I find it easier to hold hope as we see spring emerging, holding promise of new life. We have only to look outside the sanctuary to see that the bulbs we planted last fall are in bloom. The jonquils are symbols of our memories of those we love who have died. We planted them in a service of remembrance. But those flowers, like our own lives, emerge from the dark earth, and they are promising a renewal of life in the beauty of memories we have of those we love. Those flowers, like our own lives, are emerging. Perhaps nature is one of the places where we can most authentically experience that deep connection to life that reminds us over and over that all will be well. When we find joy, when we find hope, when we find love, we are recreating the world in trust that all will be well. And thank you, Susan, for being here this morning.
Good morning. When you miss the committee meeting, you get elected chairman. When you miss the club meeting, you find your president for the next year. And when you miss She Sings rehearsal, you get elected to explain the song. But really, when I was asked to talk about this song that She Sings did earlier, I thought, sure, I would love to. We've been thinking about this song for a long time, and the refrain had come to me in the past months at times when I needed reassurance and comfort, and I had really fallen in love with it. Sharing that should be easy. Then I began to really think about this song, about its message and the difficulties that come with this message. We've heard about Julian of Norwich and her times and her message, and we can see that she did not come to this sentiment easily or lightly. All will be well is not given by her as a platitude, a band-aid, or a way of keeping someone else's pain at arm's length so we don't have to deal with it. The song begins with the speaker in awe and fear saying, "Julian, you are holy, and you are holding my hand." And Julian says, "All will be well. All will be well. All manner of things will be well." The speaker then asks, essentially, "How can you say that, though? Don't you know how awful the world can be? Don't you know about disease and pain and loneliness and cruelty?" She's pretty much saying, "Are you nuts? How can you say that all will be well? When I faced these things, it was too much. It brought me to my knees. What does Julian reply to this soul-rending question, this expression of great pain? Does she say, oh, don't worry, things have a way of working out? Or when the going gets tough, the tough get going? No, she doesn't even say, God loves you and puts everything in your life for good. No, she says, you're right. No one doesn't know about these things. I know about them. And they brought me to my knees. Brought me to my knees. What a simple and powerful image that evokes. Despair, brokenness, surrender. When you're brought to your knees, you no longer fight. On your knees, you can't run away. You no longer try to deny the reality. Reality has hit you hard and knocked the wind out of your sails. But I think that there are times when this is the only place that we can really begin to see beyond our own reality. We stop fighting it. We embrace our grief, our pain, our confusion when we are on our knees. We give up and no longer depend on our wits, our strength, our charm, our intelligence to make all be well. I don't mean to say that this means don't ever try. It doesn't mean to stop caring. It just means that to accept that for some things, our caring and trying will not be enough, and they may even get in the way. So sometimes on your knees is the place where you find the comfort. I've come from decades of Christianity, and I know that in the gospel there is much comfort, for God so loved the world. There is much assurance in an eternal perspective. So there is in Christianity the message that all will be well. Similar messages are found in many religions of the world, and if they speak to your heart and spirit, be still and listen for that message that all will be well. But you don't have to subscribe to a preformed set of beliefs to experience that all will be well. Go to your knees in meditation, in awe and wonder at the beauty of the earth. Go to your knees. I don't mean literally, but rather in an attitude of openness and seeking, as opposed to an attitude of having the answers or even an attitude of having to figure them out. Pray. Meditate. Accept what is. And know that you are connected. We are all connected. You are energy. The earth is energy. The entire cosmos is that same energy. You and all whom you love or have ever loved, all of us, every creature and every being, are connected. We are all part of the unfolding of a mystery that stretches back through time so deep we cannot comprehend it. That mystery, that love, never ends. We're now going to sing this song again and invite you to sing with us the refrain of All Will Be Well. Music sometimes can take you to a place that you could not otherwise go. So let this refrain go out of this place with you and use it to take you to that place of stillness and hope when you need them. Use it to help your spirit feel that all will be well. This is
is our closing blessing, and so we ask that you hold any wish to applaud, to let it resonate in our bodies.